But let's unpack this. You're maybe out on the deck enjoying a coffee, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you spot it. A dove's nest.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like, I don't know, a toddler put it together.
Yeah.
Just a few twigs. Looks super flimsy.
Yeah, really basic.
So your first thought is probably, no big deal. I'll just brush that away. Easy.
Right. Seems simple.
But then, well, then the real fun starts. They just rebuild.
Immediately.
They move it somewhere else. Nope. They're back at it by like the afternoon, maybe even in a spot that's more annoying.
It happens all the time. It's a really common thing people run into.
So it really makes you wonder, why is dealing with these seemingly simple nests, why is it such a headache? Such a surprisingly persistent problem?
That's a great way to kick things off because, yeah, it is a common frustration. And what's fascinating right off the bat is this huge gap between how fragile the nests look
Right.
and just the sheer, determination of the birds. So today, yeah, we're diving into why these feathered squatters are so relentless. And we'll explore some, genuinely effective science-backed ways to maybe discourage them.
Okay.
We're drawing from info found online and also a particularly insightful study from the Oklahoma Ornithological Society.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So our mission for this deep dive is really to get to the bottom of this unexpected resilience the doves have, the actual science that makes certain deterrents work and, what you can actually do about it.
All right. Mission dove busting accepted.
I like it.
So these nests, they honestly look like a stiff breeze could take them out, right?
Absolutely. Just a platform of twigs, really.
It's just this haphazard pile of sticks.
Yeah.
Yet, like we both saw when we were looking into this, trying to get rid of them for good.
Yeah.
It feels like you're just constantly pushing a boulder uphill.
It really does. They just keep popping back up.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the information we looked at, it really emphasizes this point. Despite what seems like very basic construction, doves show this incredibly persistent nesting behavior. They will tirelessly rebuild, often in the exact same spot or, frustratingly close by.
Oh, yes.
Even after you've removed the nest multiple times. This sort of inherent resilience, it's fundamental. You have to understand that to get why there's such a challenge.
They don't exactly pick easy spots, do they? It's
Yeah.
always the gutter or the top of a downspout or some tiny little ledge under the eaves.
Yep. High up, awkward angles.
Places that are just a pain to even reach. It's like they have this an uncanny knack for choosing the most inconvenient real estate possible.
That's so true. And the fact that doves are just so widespread, as the online resources confirm, well, that just makes it way more likely we're going to run into this problem.
Right, they're everywhere.
Exactly. So because they're so common, these nesting attempts pop up in this huge variety of inconvenient spots all around our homes. So what looks like a simple job, based on how flimsy the nest is, it just quickly turns into this frustrating battle of wills. It's the bird's tenacity plus those hard-to-reach locations.
Yeah.
Our first thought, easy removal, is almost always proven wrong because of those two things.
Okay. So we're definitely on the same page. Doves are surprisingly stubborn little things.
They are.
Their nest might look like nothing, but actually dealing with them is, it's a whole thing.
It really is.
Now, one of the go-to solutions you see everywhere, the classic owl statue.
Yeah.
My aunt totally had one guarding her prize-winning tomatoes.
Yes, the owl decoy. Very common.
So what's the real story there? Is there actually science backing these plastic predators up? Or is it just wishful thinking?
Oh, absolutely, there's science. And here's where it gets really interesting, actually. The effectiveness of these owl statues, it hinges directly on that age-old avian predator-prey dynamic.
Okay.
Doves are prey birds, naturally, and they have this deeply ingrained fear response to their natural predators. Owls are a big one, a very recognizable threat to them.
Right, makes sense.
So the visual presence of an owl statue, even a fake one, it acts as this powerful cue. It instantly signals danger, basically telling the doves, hey, this area isn't safe to set up shop.
Huh. So it's not just like a guard gnome with feathers then.
No,
It's actually triggering a real primal fear just by sitting there.
Precisely, yeah. The research really highlights the significance of these negative visual representations. A dove's instincts scream that an owl means danger, so it's likely to just avoid areas where it spots one.
Wow.
And that 2022 study from the Oklahoma Ornithological Society, it offers some really compelling data on this exact point.
Okay, I'm all ears. What did that study find? Lay it on me.
Well, the study found a really significant reduction, 75% in dove nesting attempts, in areas where they strategically placed owl decoys.
75%, wow.
Yeah, compared to control areas areas without any decoys. That's a pretty dramatic difference, wouldn't you say?
Definitely.
And what's fascinating is that the study also pinpointed the crucial factors for this success. It wasn't just having an owl there.
Ah, okay. What were they?
How realistic the decoy looks
Right.
and exactly where it's positioned. So, a cheap-looking cartoonish owl just stuck in some random corner probably isn't going to deter much.
Yeah, I can see that.
And interestingly, the study also noted that younger, maybe less experienced doves seem to be more easily put off initially, which suggests maybe there's a learning curve in figuring out what's a real threat versus just a statue.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
A goofy plastic owl isn't going to fool a savvy bird for long, I guess.
Probably not.
And just plopping it down anywhere isn't nearly as good as putting it right where they want to build.
So thinking back to my porch railing where I first saw that flimsy nest, maybe that's the prime spot for an owl statue.
Exactly right. The research really underscores that. You've got to think strategically about where you put these visual deterrents. It all ties into this broader strategy of using natural predator cues to manage these unwanted wildlife interactions. We're essentially speaking the dove's own language, the language of fear. That's actually pretty ingenious, using their own instincts against them, but, in a totally harmless way.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about what they see, but what about what they hear? Our sources also touched on auditory deterrence. You sometimes hear about those devices, right? The ones that emit sounds to scare birds off.
Yes, those exist too.
Do they actually work on doves? Is that a thing?
Well, yes, scientifically speaking, doves, like a lot of other bird species, they do register certain sounds as indicating predators are nearby.
Okay.
So these auditory cues, they can indeed trigger that fear response, causing them to avoid areas where those sounds are happening. The scientific literature does support the idea that sound can be an effective bird deterrent.
Right. So, in theory then, could I just blast some recordings of hawk calls from my window and solve my dove problem?
Well, in theory, maybe. But this is often where the science kind of bumps up against real-world practicalities.
Ah, okay. Here comes the but.
Exactly. As the information we reviewed points out, many of these predatory sounds, well, they can be quite disruptive and, frankly, annoying to us humans.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I mean, imagine having to listen to loud hawk screeches all day long just to keep doves off your balcony.
My neighbors would love me.
Precisely. So this creates pretty significant limitations in how practical auditory deterrents are, especially, in residential areas or cities where noise is already a concern.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So, while the science might be sound, part of the pun,
Right.
the sort of human element, the livability factor, makes it a much less appealing option for most people.
That's generally the case, yes. While that scientific link between specific sounds and avian fear responses is well established, the fact that visual cues like decoys are silent and they offer that continuous presence, that often makes them more widely accepted. They're just less intrusive in, human-dominated environments. The potential for noise pollution from the sound deterrence. It frequently makes the visual methods the preferred choice for managing dove nesting around homes.
Okay, so visual deterrents, like the owl statues, seem to be the leading contender in this whole dove discouragement game.
Often, yeah.
Beyond just being quiet, which is a huge plus, what other sneaky advantages do these silent owl sentinels have? What else makes them work?
Well, one really significant benefit is just their passive operation.
Right.
Once you've positioned an owl statue to just constantly on the job, it provides this continuous, even if it's static, reminder of potential danger. And that consistent presence, it can potentially lead to more sustained avoidance by the doves over time.
Okay.
Also, like we touched on, the level of realism in the decoys you can buy now has really improved in recent years.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Much
Okay.
better than they used to be, which makes them more effective at actually mimicking a predator and, triggering that innate fear response we talked about.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
A really detailed, lifelike owl is probably way more convincing than something that looks like it came out of a cartoon.
Exactly.
But we also touched on downsides. What are the limitations? What stops the owl from being a perfect solution?
The main one, the biggest limitation, is probably the potential for habituation.
Habituation.
Yeah.
Meaning they just get used to it.
Exactly. If the doves hang around long enough and realize that, hey, this owl never actually moves, it never swoops down, it never actually poses a real threat, they might eventually just learn to ignore it. It becomes part of the landscape.
Okay, so they wise up to the fake owl.
They can, yes. And this is where strategic placement and, crucially, occasional repositioning of the decoy.
Moving it around.
Yes, that becomes absolutely vital to maintain its effectiveness over the long term. You have to kind of keep the doves guessing, prevent them from getting too comfortable or complacent about it.
Gotcha. So it's not just set it and forget it. You got to, keep them on their toes, move the owl sometime.
That's the key to combating habituation, yes.
Okay. Any other potential drawbacks we should mention?
Well, the only other thing is really just the aesthetic aspect, which is pretty subjective.
Right. Like, do you want an owl statue staring at you all day?
Exactly.
Yeah.
While some people might find an owl statue perfectly fine, maybe even a bit decorative, others might just find them visually unappealing in their garden or on their balcony. It really comes down to personal taste.
Sure.
But mostly, it's important just to reiterate that the success of these visual deterrents, it really hinges on that combination.
Mm.
You need a realistic-looking decoy.
Mm-hmm.
You need smart placement right where the doves are likely to try and nest.
Right. The hot spots.
And you need to consistently prevent that habituation by moving it around sometimes. So it does require a little bit of ongoing effort from, you, the homeowner.
Okay. Okay, so let's try and summarize our deep dive into this whole dove drama then. Basically, these birds, even though their nests look like they're made of, like, 3 twigs and hope,
Right.
they're actually surprisingly determined little squatters. Very persistent.
Extremely.
And when it comes to trying to deter them, both things they see, like our owl statues, and things they hear, like predator calls, can work by tapping into their natural fear of predators.
Correct. Both leverage natural instincts.
However, while the science supports both ways, the practical side of things, especially the noise issue with sound-based methods, often pushes people towards visual deterrence.
Yeah, visual tends to be more practical for most home situations.
And for those visual deterrents, like the owls, to really work effectively, you need 3 key things.
Yeah.
A convincing, realistic decoy, putting it in the right spot, those nesting hotspots. And you've got to be willing to move it around now and then so the doves don't just get used to it.
That's a fantastic distillation of what we've explored here.
Yes.
And what's truly remarkable, I think, is how we can apply this understanding of animal behavior, in this case, that fundamental predator-prey relationship, to address these really common everyday challenges we face.
Yeah, absolutely. It really highlights the power of just understanding why animals do what they do, doesn't it?
It does.
And then using that knowledge to find solutions that are, hopefully humane, but also effective when our paths cross, or in this case, when they decide our gutters are prime real estate.
Exactly.
So considering just how effective mimicking these natural threats can be, like with the owl statues,
Yeah.
it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other subtle environmental cues, things we might not even notice, might be quietly influencing animal behavior in the shared spaces we inhabit?
That's a great question.
And how could a deeper understanding of those cues further shape how we interact with wildlife all around us, in our daily lives? It's definitely something interesting to ponder.